Hello, I'm the Daily Storyteller, and I'm here to keep you company today. If you've visited my channel before, welcome back. And if this is your first time, I'm so glad to welcome you to the world of stories. I know many of you use these videos to relax or to help fall asleep more easily. So get comfortable, let your body relax, and allow the gentle sound of rain in the background to wash away your stress and worries. In this video, you'll hear chilling stories, most of them based on true events, told with honesty and depth. If you enjoy this content, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Now then, let's begin. I will never forget that night. The night when a strange knocking echoed through our small house, making my heart race wildly in my chest. A feeling of dread and confusion crept over me, sinking deep into every fiber of my being. 2 years ago, I lived with my 2 younger sisters and our father in a modest one-story house nestled in a neighborhood that wasn't exactly dangerous, but far from ideal. It was the kind of place where trouble often lurked in the shadows. I still remember hearing about neighbors getting arrested for selling drugs when I was only 5 years old. But this story isn't about them. It's something much more personal, something that shook us to our core. That summer of 2018, my sisters and I often stayed up late into the night. Sometimes we wouldn't go to bed until after the sun had risen. I was 17 then, and my sisters were 15 and 13. Our father, a responsible man, always went to bed early. Our house had 4 doors at the front, 3 leading into the living room and 1 that opened directly into my bedroom. The backyard fence had recently been knocked down by a storm, leaving a gaping hole that made me uneasy. At the back, there were 2 more doors, one into the kitchen and another into my dad's room. That night, around 12:30 a.m., I was doing what I usually did, sitting in my room, listening to scary stories on my phone while drawing on my iPad. I never used earbuds because I was always paranoid something might happen while I was plugged in and unable to hear. My sisters were in their room down the hall, occupied with their own things, and my dad was fast asleep. Suddenly, 4 sharp, forceful knocks shattered the quiet, pounding on the front door. The door rattled violently with each thud, the sound echoing through the entire house. I froze, holding my breath, hoping I had imagined it. But then Jen, my middle sister, burst into my room, her footsteps barely making a sound, but her eyes wide with fear. "You heard that too, right?" she whispered, voice trembling. I swallowed hard and nodded. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure everyone in the house could hear it. "We need to wake Dad," I said, already moving toward his room. Jen followed closely, and as we passed Ness's door, she peeked her head out, her face pale and scared. I shook Dad awake, trying not to tremble too much. "Dad, someone's at the front door," I said quietly, my voice barely steady. He groaned, clearly annoyed at being disturbed, but we insisted. Dad knew how jumpy we got at night, and initially thought we were just overreacting. Slowly, he got out of bed and went to the door. "There's no one out there," he told us after peeking through the blinds. I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach, but I knew I wasn't imagining things. All 3 of us had heard those knocks. We tried to convince him, but he was too tired to care. Defeated, but still terrified, I moved my mattress into Jen's room and slept there that night, clutching a baseball bat tightly, prepared to protect my sisters from any threat that might come through that door. The next day passed uneventfully, but none of us forgot the knocking. Dad dismissed it as our sleep-deprived imaginations, or maybe a big bug hitting the door, which was ridiculous. Then, at 11 p.m. that same night, the knocking returned, louder and more aggressive. This time it was on the back door, right behind Dad. who had been relaxing on the couch. Dad shouted in shock and rushed to confront whoever was out there. My sisters and I stood frozen in the living room, shaken by his loud reaction. I started to cry, begging him not to go outside. He told us to call the police, cursing as he realized whoever had knocked had vanished. The police arrived quickly and explained there had been similar complaints from neighbors. They searched around the house, including the backyard, which I had feared might hide the culprit, but found no one. After they left, Dad apologized for not believing us the first night. We accepted his apology and hoped that was the end of it. Still, I couldn't calm down and spent another night in Jen's room. Months later, Ness excitedly told me the police had caught the man responsible, an older, mentally unstable neighbor living just a few houses down. Nobody had opened their door for him, and he had only been knocking on people's doors late at night. Apparently, he was arrested shortly after. I haven't looked into the details since then, but I'm relieved he's no longer living in our neighborhood. After another break-in attempt, Dad installed a Ring doorbell with a camera, giving us some peace of mind. I hope that man either gets the help he needs or faces the justice he deserves. Though months had passed since the police caught the man, the memories of those terrifying nights lingered heavily in my mind. Even now, the image of that relentless pounding haunts me. The way the door seemed to shudder beneath each hard knock, as if the very walls were trying to warn us. It was the kind of fear that rooted itself deep inside, not the sudden jolt of panic, but a slow, creeping dread that made every creak in the house sound like footsteps, and every shadow a lurking presence. Our lives eventually settled back into a semblance of normality, thanks in no small part to the new security measures Dad put in place. The Ring doorbell camera became our silent sentinel, capturing any activity near our doors. It was a comfort to see recorded footage, even if most nights were quiet. But the fear never fully left us. It had nestled into our daily thoughts like an unwelcome guest. One evening, weeks after the man's arrest, I was alone in the house late at night, finishing up some artwork on my iPad, when the doorbell rang. My heart jumped violently. I froze, breath caught in my throat. Dad was away on a business trip and the girls were at a friend's house. I hesitated, eyes fixed on the front door camera screen on my phone. No one was there, but the doorbell had rung. The sense of unease that night was palpable. I double-checked all the locks, even walked the perimeter of the house, flashlight in hand, as if that would chase away the shadows. Of course, there was no sign of anyone, but the dread remained. That night, I realized the real terror wasn't just in the man who had knocked on our doors, but in how vulnerable we all felt afterward. In the way the ordinary had become sinister and safety was no longer guaranteed. These feelings weren't new. In fact, I'd always been sensitive to the smallest noises in the house. But after those incidents, every creak, every wind gust against the windows stirred a fresh wave of anxiety. Sometimes I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening for any sound that might signal the return of that ominous knocking. It was during these sleepless hours that my mind played tricks on me, conjuring shadows and whispers. I thought about how close we had come to danger, how easily a careless moment might have turned into tragedy. And I thought about Dad, who had initially dismissed our fears, but eventually became our protector. That summer, the three of us, my sisters and I, learned lessons about trust, fear, and family in ways we never expected. One afternoon, while scrolling through the local news online, I found a short update about the arrested man. Apparently, he'd been living with untreated mental illness for years. The article mentioned he had a history of disturbing behavior, but little support or intervention. Reading that gave me a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Relief because our nightmare was over. Sorrow because I realized how much pain and neglect must have been hidden behind those erratic knocks at our door. Since then, our neighborhood has been quieter. The police patrols stopped as the man was locked away, and neighbors seemed less wary. But even with the fear gone, a part of me remains vigilant. I still lock every door before bed, and my grip tightens on the bat if I ever hear an unexpected noise. I'm older now, more aware of the complexities of fear and protection. I understand that sometimes the threats aren't just physical. They're in the uncertainty, the unknown, and the fragile boundary between safety and danger. And though my family is safe now, I carry those nights with me as a reminder to listen carefully, to trust my instincts, and to never take peace for granted. Flying used to be second nature to me. It was part of the job, traveling across the country to pitch investment prospects to wealthy hedge fund managers. I loved the convenience, the speed, the sense of moving swiftly through the clouds. The business class seats, the drinks menu, the hum of engines, all familiar and oddly comforting. That was before that terrifying flight, the one that shattered my confidence and turned my life upside down. It was a regular business trip, flying from LaGuardia to Houston. Nothing seemed unusual at the start. I was seated by the window in business class, settled in with a magazine and scanning the drink options. The early morning had been tough. I wasn't a morning person and had gotten up around 5:30 to make the flight. As soon as I could, I shut the window shade and closed my eyes, trying to catch a few moments of rest before the busy day ahead. Then came the sound, a loud pop. At first, I thought someone was popping open a bottle of champagne nearby, perhaps a celebratory passenger enjoying fizz for breakfast. But there was no ice bucket, no attendant with glasses, nothing to suggest that. Curiosity got the better of me. I slid open the window to check the left engine of the plane. What I saw made my blood run cold. Smoke was billowing thickly from the engine, dark, ominous plumes trailing behind us as the plane sped through the sky. My heart pounded in my chest. I grabbed the nearest flight attendant and quietly pointed out the window. Her face turned pale and she rushed down the aisle toward the cockpit. Suddenly, a ripple of alarm spread among the passengers. People began pressing toward the windows on the left side, gasping and screaming. The flight attendants did their best to keep everyone calm, but panic was rising quickly. Just as chaos threatened to spiral, the captain's voice came over the intercom. His tone was strangely calm, almost detached, a stark contrast to the fear spreading through the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated and keep calm," he said. "We will be making an emergency landing at the nearest airport, which is in Virginia." Those words were the only reassurance we had. We touched down safely, the emergency crews waiting anxiously on the tarmac. The engine had suffered a serious failure. The kind of disaster no one ever wants to experience at 30,000 feet. For me, the aftermath was more than just rearranging meetings and flights. It was the dawning realization that flying might never feel safe again. Even now, I avoid planes whenever possible. I drive everywhere, to meetings, family visits, even cross-country trips. It takes longer, yes, but I'd rather face a long road trip than relive that nightmare of smoke, fire and fear in the skies. After that harrowing landing, the image of smoke trailing from the engine remained burned into my mind, haunting my every thought. Each time I closed my eyes, I could see the thick black vapor, smell the faint, acrid scent of burning oil, and hear the desperate cries of passengers around me. The emergency crews swarmed the plane as it touched down. Firefighters stood ready with hoses, paramedics prepared to assist, and pilots coordinated to secure the aircraft. Despite the efficiency and professionalism, the chaos inside my head only worsened. That day, the only tangible consequence was having to rearrange an important investment meeting. But inside me, a slow, creeping terror took root. A fear that would change how I lived and traveled forever. The weeks after the incident were a blur of anxiety attacks, cold sweats, and sleepless nights. I tried flying again, telling myself it was just a fluke, an isolated mechanical failure. But each time I boarded a plane, my body rebelled. My palms would sweat uncontrollably. My heart would race. My breath would come in shallow gasps. I'd feel trapped, powerless, a helpless passenger suspended miles above the ground. Gradually, I stopped flying altogether. Instead, I embraced the open road. Driving became my new normal. Hours behind the wheel, scenic highways, rest stops, and roadside diners. It was slower, yes, but it brought me peace. I even took to planning long drives to visit family and clients. Trips that once would have been flights. Some days, I missed the convenience of air travel. The ease of stepping onto a plane and arriving across the country in a few hours. But the fear was too strong. The memory of that flight, the terrifying sound of the engine's failure, the panic in the cabin, all of it was a vivid reminder of how fragile safety can be. It made me appreciate the simple act of being on solid ground. Since then, I've learned that fear isn't always rational. It's not always about statistics or probabilities. Sometimes it's about what the mind holds on to, what the heart refuses to let go. For me, that flight was a breaking point, a moment where the familiar became frightening and a routine part of life transformed into a source of dread. Yet, amid that fear, I found resilience. I adapted. I found new ways to live fully without succumbing to paralysis. Today, I drive across states and cities with a grateful heart, thankful for every mile traveled safely, every moment spent with loved ones. And though I may never soar through the skies again, I carry with me the lessons of that flight. To cherish life, to confront fear, and to find calm, even in the face of chaos. Every summer, my extended family gathered for a vacation. With 3 uncles, 3 aunts, and a dozen cousins spread across multiple generations, these trips were as much about fun as they were about keeping our family ties alive. My grandparents, blessed with some wealth, always rented grand houses for us to stay in, cabins by the lake, sprawling estates with docks and game rooms, places where kids could roam free and adults could relax. That particular year, they chose a massive 4-story house perched on a steep hillside overlooking a pristine lake. It had everything: a private dock, a game room filled with arcade machines, a movie theater, and even a whimsical tube slide that spiraled from the upper floors all the way down to the living room. To understand what happened next, I need to explain the house's layout, because it played a key role in turning a joyful vacation into a chilling memory. The house was literally built into the side of a steep hill. One side was embedded into the slope, while the opposite side stood on tall stilts. Underneath, between those stilts, was a cavernous cellar-like room, dark, cold, and foreboding. This cellar was accessible only by a heavy door on the lowest floor. Inside, the floor was dirt, actually just the bare earth at the bottom of the hill, and the walls were uninsulated concrete. Spiders, rodents, and the eerie silence filled the space. The homeowners who rented the house warned us to never enter this cellar. They said it was a 10-foot drop to the dirt floor, and there was no ladder or way to climb back out. Anyone who ventured inside would be trapped in that dark pit. We, of course, were curious but respectful. Most of the adults heeded the warning. The kids, especially me, were a little more reckless. After settling in for the first couple nights, the more mature members of the family, myself included, my brother and some of the aunts and uncles, decided to play a game called Sardines. It's basically hide and seek in reverse. One person hides and everyone else seeks. When a seeker finds the hider, they quietly join them until everyone is crammed in the same hiding spot. With the lights out, the entire house plunged into darkness. We gave our chosen hider, Uncle Mike, a minute to hide. Then the hunt began. We searched floor by floor, under tables, inside closets, behind couches, but Uncle Mike was nowhere to be found. After 15 minutes of fruitless searching, a thought crept into my mind. The cellar. I knew no one had dared enter it, and I wanted to be the first to find Mike, to impress the adults. Silently, I slipped away from the group, descending the stairs to the lowest floor, heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and fear. At the cellar door, I hesitated. The door was heavy and cold to the touch. My hands trembled as I gripped the handles. Before opening, I heard something, a soft, scuffling sound. Then, unmistakable, maniacal laughter echoing from the darkness beyond. My fear sharpened into dread, but I was too curious to stop. I whispered down into the abyss, "Uncle Mike." "I found you. I'm coming down." Only the laughter answered me, cold and unsettling, unlike anything I expected from my uncle. Still, I began lowering myself into the pit, hanging on to the door's edge, feet dangling above the dirt floor. As I descended, the stench hit me, a sickening foul odor that burned my nostrils. In the dim light, I could make out a figure below, slouched posture, lanky arms, but no clear facial features. My heart froze. Suddenly, I heard my aunt's voice calling up to me, "We found Mike! You're the last one!" The words crashed over me, and the fear overwhelmed every thought. I scrambled back up, abandoning the cellar, breath ragged. I ran to my aunt, screaming about the strange man beneath the house. At first, she didn't believe me, but then the laughter came again, haunting and real. She called the others, and someone phoned the police. It took nearly 25 minutes for the officers to arrive, their flashing red and blue lights cutting through the night. They stormed the house with a SWAT team. Within moments, they emerged carrying a wild-eyed man in handcuffs. The man was later identified as mentally unstable, with a warrant for his arrest related to the mutilation of his ex-wife. The terrible smell was his own filth, evidence he had been trapped in the cellar for days. He confessed he'd broken in to hide from the police, but got stuck. After the police arrested the man, a heavy silence settled over our family vacation. What was meant to be a joyous time filled with laughter, games, and warm memories had transformed into a chilling tale none of us would forget. We all grappled with the realization that the dark cellar beneath the house, a place we had been warned to avoid, had become a prison for a disturbed stranger. The foul stench that had assaulted me the moment I lowered into that pit was now explained, but the emotional scar remained. The man was charged, his true story slowly emerging. He had a history of mental illness, untreated and spiraling out of control. The mutilation charges were horrifying, but more disturbing was the way he had managed to evade authorities for so long, hiding in that cellar as if it were a refuge or a tomb. In the weeks that followed, I found myself replaying that night over and over in my mind. What if I had stayed down there? What if the laughter had been something worse? The fear, the cold darkness, and the overwhelming sense of being trapped was unlike anything I had ever experienced. I thought about my Uncle Mike, the innocent participant in our game, who unwittingly became the lure for this dangerous man. How close had we come to disaster? My family tried to return to normal, but the memory of that cellar lingered. The once inviting lake house now felt tainted, a place where shadows seemed longer and every creak in the floorboards carried a warning. Years later, the incident still serves as a reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places, even in a family vacation home meant for joy. It also taught me about courage, the courage to face fear, to act despite the terror, and to protect those you love. Sleep had always been a sanctuary for me, a place to escape the stresses of the world, a quiet refuge where I could recharge and dream. But 4 years ago, when I was 24 and still living at home during my nursing studies, sleep transformed into something far darker, a battleground where fear and helplessness reigned. It began subtly at first. Occasional nights where I'd wake feeling paralyzed, unable to move my limbs, trapped inside my own body. At first I shrugged it off as stress or exhaustion, but as the nights passed, the episodes grew longer and more intense until I could no longer ignore them. One night stands out vividly in my mind, a night when the thin line between dream and reality vanished completely. I had just fallen asleep in my childhood bedroom, a familiar space filled with memories, but now shadowed by unease. The room was dimly lit by the soft glow of a bedside lamp, and my cat Salem was curled up peacefully on the blanket beside me. Suddenly, I was awake, but frozen. I tried to move, to scream, to call out for help, but my body refused. It was as though invisible hands had pinned me to the mattress. A cold sweat broke across my forehead as panic surged through me. My breathing became shallow and rapid. From the corner of the room, almost imperceptibly at first, came a faint murmur, static-like, whispering. Slowly, the whispers turned into voices, children's voices, soft, eerie, chanting in a sing-song rhythm. "You're going to die." The phrase repeated over and over, each cycle punctuated by chilling giggles that sent icy shivers down my spine. The voices seemed to surround me, filling the room and pressing into my mind. Their tone was playful yet cruel, as if mocking my helplessness. My heart pounded so loudly I feared it would burst. Logic fought desperately to break through the terror. I told myself these sounds weren't real, that they were the product of my mind caught between waking and sleeping. But reason was drowned beneath the cacophony of laughter and chilling chants. Desperately, I focused inward, silently praying for release. The words formed a silent scream in my head, a plea for mercy. Gradually, the voices faded, the paralysis loosened its grip, and I was able to move again. I bolted upright, gasping for breath, my body trembling uncontrollably. Terrified, I ran to my mother's room and told her everything. She listened quietly, eyes wide but skeptical, unsure how to respond. I didn't expect her to understand, but I needed someone to hear me, to know that what I had experienced was real to me. The episodes didn't stop after that terrifying night. In fact, they grew more frequent, sometimes visiting me every other night, sometimes night after night. Each experience was a cruel reminder of my vulnerability, a reminder that even the safe sanctuary of sleep could turn against me. I began to dread bedtime. What once was a relief became a source of anxiety. To fight the darkness, I made small changes. I started sleeping with the lights on, a feeble barrier against the shadows that seemed to come alive when the lights went out. My cats, especially Salem, became my nightly companions and protectors. Their warm bodies curled up against mine provided a fragile sense of comfort in an otherwise hostile night. For a time, this strategy seemed to work. The episodes of paralysis slowed, and the oppressive sense of dread lessened. But then, one night, everything changed. I woke abruptly, heart pounding, unable to move, the familiar paralysis gripping me tightly. Yet this time, when I opened my eyes, the room wasn't empty. To my horror, a figure stood by the right side of my bed. It was tall and humanoid, but made of an ethereal white light, almost glowing in the dimness. Its presence was surreal and terrifying all at once. But what rooted me in fear were its eyes, piercing, electric blue, glowing with an unnatural intensity that seemed to bore into my soul. Despite the paralysis, I could feel the figure's gaze locked onto me, cold and unblinking. Salem lay beside me, utterly unaware of the apparition, peacefully sleeping as if nothing was wrong. That small detail gave me a flicker of hope. Maybe this was a hallucination, a trick of my exhausted mind. Yet the feeling of being watched, of imminent danger, was overwhelming. The figure lingered for several long moments before silently vanishing into the darkness. Even with the lights on, I no longer felt safe. The dread remained, lingering like a thick fog around me. Over time, the frequency of sleep paralysis lessened, thankfully. But the memory of those two experiences, the chanting voices and the glowing eyes, remained vivid, etched deep into my consciousness. They served as haunting reminders of how fragile the mind can be, and how the veil between sleep and waking can sometimes be dangerously thin. For those who have suffered sleep paralysis, it is more than just a bad dream. It's a profound and terrifying experience that can leave lasting scars. Babysitting seemed like a simple job, something to earn extra money while balancing nursing school and life's other demands. I had grown close to the family I worked for, tutoring their 11-year-old daughter, so when they asked me to babysit both kids a few times, I didn't hesitate. One particular night stands out vividly in my memory, a night when the ordinary became terrifying. The parents planned a night out downtown to catch a baseball game and meet friends for drinks, promising to be back before midnight. The storm had other plans. Around 8 in the evening, the rain began pounding heavily, winds whipping through the streets. We lived in a Gulf Coast city where storms could arrive fast and without mercy, flooding streets and cutting off escape routes. As the night wore on, the storm intensified, and the parents found themselves trapped in a parking lot, unable to make it home through rising waters. They called to let me know they were safe, but would be staying at a motel nearby. I settled into their guest bedroom with the kids, trying to keep calm despite the growing unease. Soon, water began seeping beneath the back doors, large double doors that opened to the yard. I gathered every towel in the house, trying to block the water's advance, wiping up puddles as best I could. After the initial floodwaters slowed, I returned to the kitchen to watch some Netflix and keep the kids calm. But then the power went out, plunging the entire house into darkness. A moment later, the burglar alarm blared. I froze. Here I was, in a pitch-black house, responsible for 2 young children, surrounded by flooded streets, impassable by car. Panic threatened to take hold. I grabbed the sharpest kitchen knife I could find, holding it tightly as I began checking all the doors. They were secure. No one was inside. A call to the parents revealed the alarm had triggered due to the power outage and needed a code to deactivate. The ordeal repeated itself 3 more times over the next few hours, each power outage setting off the alarm, fraying nerves and patience. Then, just as we thought the worst had passed, a tornado warning blared. We gathered in the study, the smallest room in the house, holding hands and waiting. Hours passed. The storm finally passed. The parents returned early morning, waking me gently from a restless sleep. Driving home, I passed fallen branches and stalled cars, reminders of the night's fury. Everyone was safe. But the memory of that night, trapped by storm, darkness, and fear, stayed with me. The hours spent huddled in that small study room felt like an eternity. The storm outside raged relentlessly, the wind howling against the windows, rain hammering down in sheets. Every creak and groan of the old house seemed amplified in the darkness, each one sending jolts of anxiety through my body. The kids, although frightened, were surprisingly brave. I held their hands tightly, whispering stories to distract them from the storm's fury. Salem, their family cat, had somehow managed to find her way into the study and curled up on the floor beside us, offering a small comfort in the bleakness. When the tornado warning finally lifted, a weary silence filled the house. We remained there for a little longer, unwilling to break the fragile calm. The storm had reminded me of the unpredictability of life, how quickly normalcy could be stripped away. When morning finally came, the parents returned. They gently woke me, their faces lined with concern but relief. They thanked me profusely for keeping the children safe through the terrifying night. Driving home, I witnessed the aftermath of the storm's wrath. Giant branches strewn across roads, abandoned cars stalled in floodwaters, and neighbors coming together to begin the long work of cleanup. That night was a lesson in resilience and responsibility. Being the adult in the room, even temporarily, meant rising to the challenge, facing fear with calm, protecting those who depended on you. I often think back to that night when storms rage or the power flickers. It reminds me how quickly things can change, how vital it is to be prepared, and how courage can surface in the darkest hours. Working the graveyard shift as a taxi driver in a bustling city usually meant one of 2 things: ferrying home drunken revelers stumbling out of bars, or dropping off late-night workers eager to get to their beds. Predictable, monotonous, and sometimes boring, until one Saturday night that shattered all of that. It was just past 3 a.m. when I noticed him. He stood on the curb, waving me down with an urgency that piqued my interest. At first glance, he didn't fit the usual late-night passenger mold. Tall, sharp-featured, impeccably dressed in a tailored dark suit, and sporting a fine straw fedora that somehow seemed anachronistic beneath the flickering street lamps. His confident, almost theatrical demeanor made me think he might be one of those big tippers that drivers always hope for. I pulled over and rolled down the window. "Where to, sir?" I asked, expecting a straightforward address. He slid into the back seat smoothly, removing his hat with a slow, deliberate motion, revealing neatly combed salt and pepper hair. His eyes, dark and piercing, flicked around the cab before settling on me with an unreadable expression. "I'm in town on business," he said, voice calm, but carrying an edge of mystery. "Looking for someone to show me around." That piqued my curiosity. Who in their right mind tours a city at 3 a.m.? But the streets were quiet, and I figured why not make the ride interesting. For the next couple of hours, I took him around the city, the university, the Capitol building, some late-night diners that were still open. We talked about everything from politics to the best local coffee spots. And then, out of nowhere, he dropped a bombshell. "I'm what some people would call a contract killer," he said flatly, without a trace of remorse or boastfulness. I blinked, startled, unsure if he was joking, maybe a macabre sense of humor. I laughed nervously. "You're kidding, right?" But he wasn't. His face remained serious as he went on to explain how clients reached out to him, how he verified details, negotiated payments, and carried out his work with chilling efficiency. "The way it works is simple," he said. "A woman contacts me. I check her references, make sure everything's legit. Then we discuss money. Once we agree, I do the job." I asked, half joking, half curious. "How do you make sure you get paid after the job's done? Seems risky." He smirked. "I don't reveal my methods." "A professional keeps secrets." I pressed further. "And how does a client know the job's been completed?" His tone turned darker, laced with bitter irony. "If your target suddenly dies, news travels fast. Between the 24-hour news cycle and social media, the client usually finds out. No formal confirmation needed." Despite the morbid subject, I found myself fascinated. There was something oddly compelling about the way he spoke. Calm, methodical, almost detached. We spoke about his past. He joined the army fresh out of high school, quickly catching the attention of his superiors. After years of government work, he decided to go freelance, a lone wolf in a deadly business. His storytelling was captivating. He painted vivid pictures of shadowy meetings, secretive phone calls, and close calls with the law. The city streets and neon lights outside faded away as I was drawn into his world of calculated danger. Hours slipped by as the city slowly woke up around us. The once empty streets filled with early commuters and street vendors setting up shop. As the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, I finally asked the question that had been nagging me all night. "Are you here for a specific job?" He grinned slyly. I was. But the client changed her mind last minute, cancelled the hit. I got to keep half the payment. "That's business." He reached over and handed me a thick wad of cash, crisp $100 bills, telling me to keep the change. As he opened the door to leave, he said something that sent a chill down my spine. "Take care of Linda and stay out of trouble." I watched him disappear into the dawn-lit street, heart pounding. How did he know my wife's name? The moment he stepped out of the cab, his words echoed in my mind. "Take care of Linda and stay out of trouble." How could he possibly know my wife's name? I hadn't mentioned it once during our entire ride. No documents or IDs visible, just two strangers in the back of a taxi. Driving away, a knot of unease settled deep in my stomach. Was this man really a hitman? Or was he an elaborate storyteller, spinning a dark fantasy for his own amusement? I tried to shake the thoughts, focusing instead on the early morning streets and the gentle hum of the engine. But the seed of doubt had taken root. Later that day, I couldn't get Linda, my wife, out of my head. The man's words haunted me. Was she somehow involved? Was she the client who cancelled a hit on me? The idea was absurd, yet terrifying. When Linda called that afternoon, I struggled to sound normal. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see that stranger lurking nearby. We talked about mundane things, but beneath the surface, I was searching for answers, for any clue that might explain the night's events. Days turned into weeks, and the memory of that night refused to fade. Every time the phone rang unexpectedly or a shadow crossed the window, my heart raced. I even started noticing strange things. A door left unlocked, unfamiliar footsteps when no one was home. The paranoia grew, straining my relationship with Linda. I wanted to confront her, but feared the truth, afraid it might shatter the fragile peace we'd rebuilt after years of ups and downs. I wondered if she'd ever admit to such a secret, or if she even knew what had happened that night. Had she truly changed her mind, or was the threat still lurking, silent and deadly? One night I finally decided to ask. I confronted Linda gently, watching her face for any sign of guilt or fear. She denied everything, confusion clouding her eyes. "No," she said softly. "I don't know what you're talking about." The relief was immediate, but so was the doubt. Was it relief because she was innocent, or because she was hiding something? That question still lingers. To this day, I don't know whether that man was truly a contract killer or a con artist with a dark imagination. Nor do I know if Linda was ever in danger or involved. What I do know is that night changed me. It taught me how fragile trust can be, how a single conversation, a few cryptic words, can unravel the certainty of a life, and how sometimes the darkest stories are the ones closest to home. The summer after my sophomore year of high school was filled with that restless energy only teenagers understand, the desperate need for freedom, for excitement, and the thrill of hanging out with friends without any adults hovering nearby. One of those warm nights found me and a group of about 10 friends at the state fair, a sprawling carnival filled with bright lights, loud music, and the sweet scent of funnel cakes and popcorn. We had claimed a spot toward the back of the fairgrounds near the less crowded rides, a place where the noise mellowed just enough for us to talk, joke, and sometimes compete for the attention of passing girls. It was the kind of night that felt infinite, the air thick with laughter and youthful bravado. That's when he appeared. He was a man in his late 40s or early 50s, average height but with a presence that immediately drew our eyes. His head was bald on top, though thick hair curled over the sides, giving him an eccentric look. He moved with confidence, his steps purposeful as he approached our circle. "Are you guys waiting for the ship as well?" he asked in a voice that brooked no argument. We exchanged bewildered glances, unsure whether he was joking or serious. One of my friends, always quick with a joke, chuckled and asked, "The ship? What ship?" With a solemn expression, the man answered, "The ship from space." "Are you here to board as well?" Laughter erupted among us. The idea was absurd. Spaceships? Aliens? It sounded like something out of a sci-fi movie or a late-night conspiracy theory. The man's chipped teeth flashed in a smile as he repeated, "Yeah, the ship. From the Andromeda Galaxy, of course." Our laughter grew louder. Some of us doubled over, tears in our eyes. This had to be a joke or a man clearly in need of help. But then something changed. His confident, almost theatrical tone dropped to a whisper, almost pleading. "Go ahead and laugh at me. When they come, you'll see." The levity drained from the moment, replaced by an uneasy silence. His eyes locked onto ours, fierce and desperate. We tried to brush him off, telling him to leave us alone, but he followed, his voice rising in anger and urgency. "Stop laughing. Stop ignoring the truth. They will be here soon. We need to be ready." People began to notice. Fairgoers turned to look, some whispering, others curious or concerned. Slowly, a circle formed around us, and the man, creating an uneasy theater of spectators. I tried to stay calm, but a flicker of fear ran through me. Was this man dangerous, or simply lost in his own delusions? Despite the wildness of his claims, I felt a pang of sympathy. It was clear he was suffering, haunted by visions or voices we couldn't understand. Eventually we slipped away, hearts pounding as we made our way to the parking lot where our rides awaited. From a distance I saw him standing near the edge of a wooded area, motionless, staring up at the sky. When we reached the van, the man began walking toward us at a brisk pace. His eyes locked on ours, and as we hurried inside, he waved awkwardly and whispered, "I'll see you up there." The words hung in the air, cryptic and chilling. As the van pulled away, I couldn't shake the feeling that the night had just scratched the surface of something far stranger and far more unsettling than a simple carnival encounter. The van ride back to the parking lot was silent, the energy between my friends and me weighed down by the strange encounter. None of us spoke about the man or his wild proclamations, but his presence lingered like a shadow, casting doubt and unease over what should have been a carefree night. I kept stealing glances at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see him following us, some spectral figure from another world. That evening, sleep was elusive. My mind churned with questions. Who was that man? Was he truly delusional, or was there some truth hidden beneath his frantic warnings? Over the following weeks, the memory of that night resurfaced repeatedly, each time accompanied by an eerie sense of unfinished business. I found myself wandering back to the fairgrounds each year, drawn by a mixture of nostalgia and the hope, however irrational, of seeing that strange man again. But he never returned. His words, "I'll see you up there," echoed in my thoughts, becoming a haunting refrain I couldn't shake. Was he speaking of an escape beyond this world? A destiny we were unknowingly tied to, or merely a man lost in his own fractured reality? Sometimes I wonder if he was trying to warn us, to prepare us for something beyond comprehension. Other times I think of the kindness we showed him in laughter and dismissal, and whether he found any solace in that moment of connection. Years later, the memory of that night still feels vivid, a reminder that the world holds more mysteries than we can explain. That man, with his desperate eyes and fractured truths, challenged my understanding of reality and left me questioning the boundaries between belief and madness. And every time I return to that fairground, I look toward the shadows, wondering if the ship from Andromeda is truly out there, waiting for us to board. Long before I came into this world, long before I could even imagine the stories that would shape my family's history, my mother faced a chilling ordeal, one that would leave a mark not only on her soul, but ripple through the fabric of our lives. She was only 16 then, a young woman on the cusp of adulthood, full of hope and dreams of the future. But for nearly a year, her nights were stolen by a recurring dream, a haunting vision that played out with unrelenting clarity night after night. In the dream, she found herself standing in a cemetery. Not just any cemetery, but an old, weathered place where the ground was uneven and shadows stretched long under a pale moonlight. Beside her was a boy, perhaps her age or slightly younger, though she never knew his name or face clearly. He was a stranger, silent, watchful, and as lost as she was. Surrounding them was a group of men, imposing figures, standing solemnly in a tight circle. Their faces were often blurred, their presence imposing yet strangely calm. The air was thick with tension, a solemnity that pressed down on her chest like a heavy stone. Each night, the same ritual began. One of the men, stepping forward with quiet authority, would look directly at the boy. "Would you die for her?" he asked, his voice low but carrying the weight of an irrevocable decision. The boy always answered, "No." Then the man turned to my mother. "Would you die for him?" he asked. Her answer was also, "No." The dream would end soon after, leaving her to awaken with a sense of unease that lingered through the day. But then came the night when everything changed. This time, the man asked the boy first, "Will you die for her?" The boy replied as before, "No." Then the man faced my mother again. "Will you die for him?" For reasons she could never fully explain, whether it was curiosity, fear, or a deep, inexplicable instinct, she answered yes. The man's eyes bore into her soul as he said, "Your fate is sealed, and so is his." But unlike previous nights, no violence or harm followed. Instead, she woke suddenly, heart pounding, drenched in sweat, the weight of those words heavy on her mind. That very day, she was preparing for a fashion show in a nearby city. Her aunt and best friend accompanied her, and together they piled into the car, laughter and music filling the small space as they drove. But the strange feeling from the dream clung to her like a shadow. As they drove along the highway, a metallic scraping sound began, a grinding, scraping noise like metal dragging over concrete. They searched the car, checked the tires and brakes, but found nothing wrong. They shrugged it off and continued. Then, just minutes later, the highway was blocked by flashing police lights, cordoning off the lane where a catastrophic accident had taken place. The officer motioned them to stop, explaining that the collision had just occurred, mere moments after they had passed that spot on the road. When my mother looked through the police barricade, she saw a body being carried away, covered by a white sheet. She knew immediately. It was the boy from her dream. After that day, the dreams stopped. The days following that chilling highway accident blurred into a haze of shock and disbelief for my mother. The reality of what had happened, that the boy from her dreams was indeed gone, taken far too soon, weighed heavily on her spirit. She often found herself retracing the memories, questioning every detail of the dream and its connection to the real world. Was it merely a coincidence, or had she glimpsed something beyond human understanding, a premonition of fate sealed before birth? Despite the passage of time, the image of the cemetery from her dreams remained etched in her mind. It was an ancient place, tucked away in the countryside, where the gravestones stood weathered and the silence was profound. Years later, compelled by a mixture of curiosity and reverence, she visited that very cemetery. The air was thick with history and sorrow, each grave a silent testament to lives lived and lost. Walking among the rows, she felt an uncanny sense of peace mingled with sorrow, a connection to the boy she never knew and the unseen forces that had woven their destinies together. That experience transformed her. It deepened her faith and her understanding of the fragility and preciousness of life. She became a woman who treasured every moment, who believed deeply in signs and the mysteries that lie just beyond human perception. As I grew up hearing her story, it became more than just a haunting memory. It was a legacy, a lesson in courage and acceptance passed down through generations. She taught me that sometimes life whispers warnings in dreams and symbols, urging us to be mindful of the paths we walk. That fate is not always clear, and sometimes the greatest acts of bravery are found in saying yes to the unknown, to love, to sacrifice, to hope. Though she never again experienced those dreams, the question from that cemetery night, "Will you die for him?" lingered in her heart like a solemn vow. It became a reminder that love often requires difficult choices, and that destiny is shaped by the decisions we make, sometimes without fully understanding their weight. In our family, that story is told quietly, with reverence and awe, a bridge between the past and the present, a testament to the power of dreams and the mysteries of fate. And as for me, I carry it with me always, a reminder that the unknown is never far, and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is to face it head on. For as long as I can remember, I have worked in the funeral business. It's a job that many shy away from, but for me, it has been a solemn calling. Our cemetery sits in the heart of a rural town, one of the oldest you'll find, its soil steeped in centuries of stories, memories, and silent rest. The church beside the cemetery was built in the 17th century. Its weathered stone walls hold echoes of countless prayers, and the cemetery itself sprawls unevenly across the landscape. A patchwork of graves marked by simple wooden crosses, many faded or broken, swallowed gradually by ivy and wild flowers. This isn't the manicured cemetery you see in the city, with polished marble and neat rows. No, here, bones occasionally surface from the earth during routine maintenance, reminders that beneath our feet lies a labyrinth of forgotten lives. Respecting those who rest here is a daily ritual. Every day, as I tend to the grounds or assist families, I carry the weight of that respect in my heart. Yet, despite years of experience, there have been moments that chilled me. Moments where the veil between the living and the dead seemed thinner, almost permeable. One such moment happened when a family member of one of the buried decided to expand their loved one's plot. They wanted to clear and smooth the earth around the grave, raking the soil into neat, Zen-like patterns. As they worked, something strange caught their eye. A patch of snow-white hair peeking out from beneath the freshly turned earth. The sight was so unnatural, so out of place, that they dropped their tools and fled, leaving me to investigate. When I arrived, I carefully examined the area. The hair was real, tangled and matted, clinging stubbornly to the soil. I called the church authorities, and arrangements were made to reinter the remains with dignity. Even with all my years around death, the discovery unsettled me. How could a body lie so close to the surface, uncovered by time and elements? But this was only the beginning of a series of strange happenings that would test my resolve. On another occasion, my business partner and I were preparing to embalm a young woman who had recently passed, only 27 years old. The ritual was somber and practiced, gently moving her from the coffin to the embalming table, surrounded by the quiet hum of our work. Suddenly, from across the room, an old radio, a vintage piece with a simple dial, clicked on by itself, blasting static at full volume. We both stopped dead in our tracks. My partner, a deeply religious man, visibly recoiled, his hands trembling. I moved quickly to turn the radio off, trying to shake off the creeping unease. But moments later, it clicked again, the static filling the room once more. That was the moment I decided to leave. No words were exchanged between us about what had happened. The silence spoke volumes. Since then, nothing quite like it has occurred, but the memory lingers. In a job surrounded by death, one expects certain things: sadness, grief, closure. But the unknown, the unexplainable moments, are what truly haunt the quiet corridors of a funeral home. After that unsettling incident with the radio, a palpable tension settled over our funeral home. The routine comfort I once found in the quiet solemnity of the place was replaced by a creeping unease, an awareness that some things in this world refuse to rest. My partner, shaken by the experience, became more withdrawn, relying heavily on his faith to shield him from what he felt was beyond natural understanding. I, too, found myself glancing nervously at the radio, half expecting it to burst into static at any moment. In the days that followed, strange things began happening around the funeral home. Doors that were firmly shut would creak open on their own. Cold drafts would sweep through rooms with no apparent source. Lights flickered unpredictably, casting long shadows that seemed to move independently. One evening, as I was alone, preparing paperwork late into the night, I heard faint whispers echoing down the hallway. At first I thought it was the wind or perhaps my imagination. But the whispers grew clearer. Indistinct words spoken in hushed tones, almost pleading. I followed the sound to the chapel, where the dim light of candles flickered. There, I felt a sudden chill and a profound sadness wash over me, as if the walls themselves mourned. I spoke aloud, offering a silent prayer for peace, hoping to calm whatever restless spirits lingered. Despite the fear, I came to understand that the funeral home was a place where the veil between life and death was thin, where those who had passed sometimes reached out, not to frighten, but to seek comfort or closure. Working in such a place taught me humility, that death is not an end, but a transition, that respect, compassion, and understanding are the bridges between worlds. And while the whispers and eerie moments remain, they serve as reminders of the lives touched and the mysteries that surround us all. Working at a non-profit organization that offers support to individuals grappling with mental health issues and substance abuse has been a journey filled with highs and lows. Each day brings stories of hope, resilience, and sometimes heartbreak. But amidst the routine of counseling, outreach, and community engagement, there was one experience that shook me to my core and left an indelible mark on my psyche. It began innocuously enough, with a series of phone calls from a man using a private number. Initially, his voice was calm, almost subdued. He would call regularly, sometimes daily, sharing his worries about home life, the stresses that weighed on him, and his struggles to maintain sobriety. On the surface, he seemed like many others seeking support, looking for a listening ear in moments of vulnerability. But over time, the tone of his calls changed. Subtle at first, hints of frustration and anger creeping into his words. Then, more disturbing details began to emerge. He started describing violent fantasies with unsettling clarity, narrating how he derived pleasure from controlling others in cruel and unusual ways. One call remains etched in my memory. He told me with a chilling calmness how he enjoyed supergluing women to chairs, watching their frantic attempts to free themselves, their panic, their helplessness. I remember sitting frozen, disbelief washing over me. The image was grotesque, a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of human minds. My stomach churned, and a surge of anger and fear flooded my senses. I ended the call abruptly, hands trembling. The office felt suddenly claustrophobic, the walls closing in. For weeks after, the calls ceased, and I hoped the nightmare had passed. Then, one quiet afternoon, a colleague called in sick, leaving me alone in the office during a typically busy shift. As I worked through paperwork, trying to maintain calm, a sharp knock at the front door startled me. Visitors were usually expected to call ahead, so this was unexpected. Cautiously, I approached the frosted glass and peered out. The silhouette of a large man loomed, blocking the doorway. I hesitated, then cracked the door open and greeted him firmly but politely. His eyes met mine, dark, cold, and unreadable. There was something predatory in his gaze, a silent challenge. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then, in a voice I recognized instantly, he said simply, "I need to talk." Without waiting for permission, he pushed the door open and stepped inside, filling the room with an unsettling presence. I motioned to a chair, trying to keep my composure despite the rising tide of fear. He sat, leaning back casually, and with a half-smile said, "I can't stop doing it. I glue women to chairs. Watching them struggle, it makes me feel alive, better than anything else." The words landed like a hammer blow. I slowly edged my hand toward the work phone, eyes darting to every possible exit, calculating my chances. He noticed my discomfort and teased, "Am I making you uncomfortable?" I forced a false calm, saying no, while my mind screamed for an escape. Suddenly he stood, towering over me. My heart pounded, breath caught in my throat. But then, unexpectedly, he extended his hand. "Thanks for the chat," he said with a smirk. I managed a weak response as he left. Once the door clicked shut behind him, I locked every bolt and called my supervisor, hands still shaking. The hours after that terrifying encounter were a blur of adrenaline and anxiety. I sat alone in the office, my mind racing as I tried to process what had just happened. The man's presence, his words, and that unnerving calmness haunted every corner of the room. I informed my supervisor immediately, who assured me that security measures would be reviewed and strengthened. But the incident left a lingering fear that was hard to shake. Days passed with relative calm, but the uneasy feeling remained. Then, one afternoon, a new team member was on shift. As she settled into her duties, the phone rang. Another call from a private number. I watched her face fall as she answered. She handed me the phone with a pale expression. The man's voice was unmistakable, dripping with the same chilling amusement. "Hello," he said casually. "I just want to talk. I can't stop asking women their bra sizes in public." I cut the call short, firm and resolute. "Sir, this is not that kind of support line," I said sternly. "We are here for serious help, not for inappropriate behavior. If you need addiction support, I can provide numbers for the right services." The call ended abruptly. Weeks passed without contact, and hope grew that the ordeal was finally over. But then, as I waited for takeout in a restaurant one evening, I heard a familiar voice behind me. Turning, I locked eyes with the same dark gaze that had unsettled me months before. He looked panicked, almost desperate, gathering his food hastily and rushing away. Despite the fear, I managed to snap a photo of his vehicle as he sped off. Since then, I have taken every precaution, installing panic buttons, adding chain locks, and remaining vigilant. Working in mental health support has taught me compassion and patience, but also caution. Some individuals struggle with demons that can manifest in dangerous ways. I urge everyone to be kind to those battling inner turmoil, but also to trust your instincts and protect yourself. The line between help and harm can be thin. At 16, flying alone was a milestone, a mix of independence and nerves. I had made the trip before, visiting my dad in another city after school, but this particular flight would etch itself into my memory for all the wrong reasons. The airport was bustling as usual, filled with travelers rushing to catch their planes, families saying tearful goodbyes, and tired workers moving through the crowds. I arrived early, clutching my carry-on, feeling a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Finding a quiet corner near the gate, I settled in with a book, occasionally glancing up as announcements echoed overhead. The hum of conversations and rolling luggage created a familiar backdrop, but something felt off. Then I noticed him. A man, probably in his mid-40s, well-dressed in a neat shirt and jacket, stood across the terminal. His gaze was fixed on me, unwavering and intense. Every time our eyes met, he held my stare a beat too long, a subtle smile playing on his lips that didn't reach his eyes. I shifted in my seat, heart picking up pace. The feeling was strange, a cocktail of curiosity, unease, and growing fear. As boarding was called, I gathered my things, hoping to lose him in the crowd. But as I walked down the jetway, he appeared behind me, calm and steady. I tried not to look back, focusing on the flight attendants and passengers ahead. Taking my seat by the window, I sighed with relief, hoping to find some comfort in the familiar hum of the plane. But then, the middle seat next to me was taken by the man who had been watching me. I swallowed hard, nerves twisting in my stomach. He introduced himself as Jack, a college football referee, his voice casual but with an edge that sent chills down my spine. He asked about my school, my cheerleading. The jacket I wore made that obvious, and casually dropped my name, Riley, as if he'd known it forever. I gave clipped answers, turning my head away, trying to appear asleep. He shifted to the aisle seat, leaving a small space between us. For the duration of the flight, I avoided eye contact, focusing on the window or burying my face in my book. Then, as the plane began its descent, I felt a hand lightly brush my arm. He whispered with a sinister grin, "You're such a cute sleeper. I wish you would have never woken up." The words froze me. I kept my eyes closed, heart pounding wildly. When the plane touched down and the passengers began to disembark, I stayed close to the flight attendants. One pulled me aside, her face pale. She told me that Jack had been taking pictures of me while I slept, commenting about how cute his daughter was when she slept. Fear washed over me. As we moved through the airport, I caught sight of him waiting near the exit, eyes locked on mine. I quickened my pace, my breath catching in my throat. Finally, I ran into my dad's arms, relief flooding through me. The man vanished into the crowd. I never learned his true intentions. But I knew one thing for sure. I would never take a flight alone again. Even after the plane touched down and I was safely in my dad's arms, the terror of that flight lingered like a shadow that refused to fade. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see Jack's cold, calculating gaze, the sinister smile that hinted at dark intentions. The experience shattered the innocence I had clung to during my teenage years, leaving me with a deep sense of vulnerability. Back home, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every unfamiliar face, every unexpected sound made my skin crawl. Sleep was elusive, and when it came, nightmares followed, twisted echoes of that flight, the man's words ringing in my ears. My parents noticed the change. They tried to reassure me, to restore a sense of safety and normalcy. But I knew things would never be quite the same. The flight attendant who had warned me became a trusted ally. She offered to accompany me through the airport whenever I traveled, even if just to help me feel safe. Despite her support, I decided to avoid flying alone from that day forward. Driving became my new reality, long hours on the road replacing the brief hours in the sky. It wasn't just about fear of flying anymore. It was about reclaiming control. Years later, whenever I think back to that flight, I feel a mixture of gratitude and sadness. Gratitude for the quick thinking of the flight crew and my dad's waiting arms. Sadness for the innocence lost, for the vulnerability exposed. I never confronted Jack, never reported him beyond that initial conversation with the attendants. Part of me wanted to believe he was just a disturbed man who never acted on his dark impulses. But the other part knew the world holds shadows we cannot always see or understand. The experience taught me to trust my instincts, to speak up when something feels wrong, and to never underestimate the kindness of strangers who step in when danger lurks. Flying will always be tinged with that fear for me, but more importantly, I learned resilience, the courage to face the world again, even when it feels unsafe. Every summer, our extended family carried on a tradition that was as much about bonding as it was about escape. My grandparents, comfortably well off and generous, would rent out a grand vacation home where all of us, a sprawling network of cousins, aunts, uncles and siblings, could gather for a week of laughter, games and memories. That year, they chose a massive 4-story house nestled on the steep slope of a hill overlooking a pristine, glassy lake. From the outside, it looked like something out of a storybook. Its wooden beams blending with the surrounding forest, large windows reflecting the water's shimmer, and an inviting dock stretching into the tranquil lake. The house was equipped with everything imaginable: a game room filled with arcade machines and board games, a cozy movie theater with plush seating, a sprawling kitchen that could feed an army, and the pièce de résistance, a winding tube slide that spiraled dramatically from the top floor down to the bottom. Everyone was buzzing with excitement. But the architecture of the house was unusual. The lower part of the house wasn't supported by the hill, but stood on towering stilts reinforced with brick, creating a cavernous, cellar-like room beneath the main floors. This room had dirt floors and was a known haunt for spiders, rodents, and the occasional creepy crawly of every sort. The homeowners cautioned us all never to venture down there. It was a dark, cold place, with no ladder or exit except through the cellar door on the bottom floor. We all heeded the warning, at least most of us did. After settling in and enjoying a couple of days filled with laughter and shared meals, the grown-ups, my uncle, my aunts and I, decided to spice up the vacation with a game of sardines. It's a variation of hide and seek, where one person hides and as others find them, they silently join the hiding spot, squeezing into the same space until only one seeker is left out. With the house plunged into darkness, all lights off, the atmosphere was perfect for a thrilling night. My Uncle Mike was selected as the first to hide. We spread out, checking closets, under beds, behind couches, and in every nook and cranny of the sprawling home. Minutes ticked by with no sign of him. Then the cellar door, the forbidden door, beckoned to me. Curiosity tugged at my nerves, and I was young and eager to impress. I crept away from the group and descended the stairs to the bottom floor, heart hammering in my chest. The cellar door loomed in front of me, a solid wooden barrier that closed off the dark abyss beneath the house. As I placed my hands on the cold handles, I heard a faint sound, scuffling and a strange, maniacal laughter, a thrill of excitement mixed with a growing sense of dread. I whispered down into the darkness, telling my uncle that I had found him and was about to join. But the laughter was not his. It was unsettling, wild and unhinged. Lowering myself carefully into the dark room, a foul stench assaulted my senses, a sickly, overwhelming odor that made me gag. In the shadows I made out a shape. It was slouched, lanky, and moved with a strange, unnatural gait. My heart stopped. Fear surged through me like a tidal wave. Suddenly, my aunt's voice echoed from upstairs, calling out my name. She said everyone else had found my uncle. I was the last. Panic overtook me. I scrambled back toward the cellar door, trembling violently. I burst out of the darkness, screaming for help. When I finally pulled myself out of the darkness, gasping for breath and trembling uncontrollably, the sound of my own screams filled the vast, silent space beneath the house. The sudden eruption of panic shattered the eerie stillness, and soon footsteps hurried down the stairs. My aunt arrived first, her face drained of color, her hands trembling as she held a flashlight. She shone its narrow beam into the cellar, illuminating the grim scene below. In the corner of that shadowy pit crouched a man, disheveled, wild-eyed, and coated in dirt and grime. His clothes were ragged and torn, and he laughed, a low, maniacal sound that sent chills down my spine. The stench hit us like a wall, a sickening mixture of decay and neglect that made my stomach churn. It was clear that he'd been trapped there for days, perhaps longer. My relatives gathered around cautiously as the reality settled in. This man was a stranger to our family and our home. Within moments, we called the authorities, who arrived swiftly with a SWAT team. The house that had once been filled with joy and laughter was now a scene of flashing red and blue lights, heavy boots, and tense voices. The man was arrested without resistance, muttering incoherent phrases and occasionally breaking into that chilling laughter. Later, we learned the details. He was a mentally unstable individual, wanted for the brutal mutilation of his ex-wife. Desperate to evade capture, he had broken into our family home and hidden in the cellar, only to become trapped. The experience shook us to the core. The safe haven we had treasured turned into a prison of terror, and the innocence of our summer retreat was forever lost. In the weeks and months that followed, the house was modified to prevent any access to the cellar. Barricades, alarms, and new locks were installed. But the story remained, retold at family gatherings as a grim reminder of how fragile security truly is. Yet, amidst the fear, a strange sense of resilience emerged. We had faced the unimaginable and survived. The laughter and joy returned to our reunions, tempered by a newfound respect for the unknown lurking just beneath the surface. That summer was a turning point, a lesson that no matter how strong our bonds or how secure our surroundings, life holds surprises we cannot predict. And sometimes survival is not just about strength, but about the courage to face the darkness and come back to the light.